Hello everybody. Right, so I'm going to be on camera tonight. It's going to be a Echoes of Us, and it's going to be about, I have to find out.
No, I've got it wrong again. Fuck's sake. Hi, this is Echoes of Us, and we're here tonight telling the story of Eleanor Salter. Now, from the age of 12 to the age of 14, Eleanor was abused by a family member. Now, she ended up having to move from Leeds to Huddersfield with her family just because of that, because she ended up pregnant. So her parents decided to put her into Storthes Hall Hospital because she was basically an unwed mother, and that's how it went back in the 1930s. Now, she ended up staying there for 18 months. She had the baby. Her uncle passed away in that time, so her auntie visited her frequently, really frequently. Now, after she'd had the baby, she'd done a little bit of healing, a little bit of counselling and speaking to people. She were able to leave the hospital and go back to her parents. This is when the next chapter of her life started. Eleanor and her parents moved to the sweetest little back-to-back in Huddersfield, where they made it their home for many, many years to come. As Eleanor grew up, she absolutely enjoyed her life. She went to school. She learned many, many things. She learned how to fix things in the house. She just had complete and utter fun with her parents. It was a really, really, let's say, lenient household. Then came the day she turned 18. The days after that, should I say, were some of the best days of her life. Those are the days where she met John. John and Eleanor met in a shop. She'd gone shopping for her mum, and John was stood in the window as she entered the shop. She couldn't believe her eyes, to be honest. She thought that he was the most handsome man that she's ever seen in her life. But it went from there. Romance blossomed, and it were a whirlwind romance, literally. They spent every single day together, walking along the canal, holding hands, professing love to each other, going for picnics. And the funniest encounter they had ever was the incident with a dog that absolutely ruined the picnic and sent Eleanor flying. It was quite funny. But yeah, they recovered from that. But Eleanor was so clumsy, it were unreal. They had lots of fun together. And then John ended up signing up to the Second World War.
John was at the train station. As he was leaving, he watched Eleanor. She waved. He was gutted. He joined the Royal Engineers, which is the sappers, to go towards Normandy, etc. And sadness just filled his heart for a minute because he was gutted. He never got a chance to ask her to marry him. He never got a chance to do what he really wanted just before he went away. He didn't know what was upcoming. He had no idea whatsoever. But it was a lot of torment to him. But the one thing that I definitely know that did keep him alive is just wanting to marry Eleanor.
When Eleanor was seeing John off at the train station, she was just absolutely heartbroken. She never got to marry the man that she absolutely adored. She didn't want him to go to war. It was just one of those things that she could never have imagined, being without him for so long. She was absolutely heartbroken by it. And as she waved him off, she just sobbed and sobbed. It was the worst feeling in the world for her.
About a year had passed. John didn't even know where he was anymore. He just looked at the scenery around him, just hoping that maybe he could go back to that summer that he spent with Eleanor just before he had to go to the war. The one thing that not many people knew about him is he'd been to Eleanor's dad to get help with becoming a mechanic and learning about mechanical stuff and engineering, and he put his heart into it. But he really enjoyed his job. He really enjoyed the camaraderie with his friends out there, but everybody were just lonely. And the one good thing he knew is that he'll get back one day.
While John was at war, Eleanor had never felt so lonely. She was living with his sister Jean, helping with the kids, but life just wasn't the same without him. She'd wait for his letters, sometimes they didn't come, but when they did, she was so happy that he was alive and well. It took her some time to get used to life without him, but she'd always be there waiting for him to get back.
After the war had ended, D-Day had been seen through. John finally got his marching orders to go home. He got an early train. He wanted to go home and surprise everybody. But as we were coming back into London, he just didn't know how to feel. He felt lost. All them years had passed, what had happened, how people had changed. Even if Eleanor had loved him, there were so many things that were going through his mind, as well as all the torment and the troubles that he went through. I don't think he knew at the time that the night terrors, now called PTSD, would haunt him for a long, long time. He ended up going missing for quite a while. He went away for 3 days, just walking around London and just chatting to general folk. He had a drink or two, just to, calm the nerves. But I don't think he could ever found what he left with for when he was coming back, and that's what upset him the most. And I think this is what kind of made John just go off the rails a little as time went on.
When John came back from the war, Eleanor was so happy to see him. Little did she know how much John had changed. She was soon to find out. They did the best, living with his sister and just trying to carry on with normal life, but it just wasn't the same. John was really, really withdrawn. He just wanted himself. He wanted the man that Eleanor knew before he left for the war. Now, one night, John had gone to bed. He was sleeping peacefully. So Eleanor crept upstairs, got into bed at the side of him, started to go to sleep. And then John woke up. He started having a night terror. Eleanor tried to comfort him, which she didn't know was the wrong thing to do. She just put her arm around him, and he ended up with his hand around her throat, strangling her. She tried to move, she tried to get up, she tried to get him off, but she just couldn't. So she screamed as much as she could, moved her arm out, and it knocked a glass off the side cabinet. His sister ran upstairs and managed to help Eleanor out of the bedroom. She knew this wasn't John. She knew that this wasn't his fault, but it wasn't something that could be lived with long term.
John woke up, didn't know where he was. The flashback was quite simple. He was in France somewhere, didn't know where. He was sleeping under the stars and the moon. When he woke up, the almighty biggest bang went off. Sirens, noises, screams. He didn't know what was going on. And this is what happened. That he was dreaming about. His brain was trying to process all the stuff that had happened. And as Eleanor tried to comfort him while he was sleeping, he thought he was back there and he reacted like somebody was trying to kill him. So his automatic reaction was to grab Eleanor around the neck to defend himself. When he did come to, he just sat on the side of the bed, just in cold sweat, and didn't know what had happened, because as soon as he woke up, the memory just went like that. The day after, John got up and he just thought, why? What is going on? Why is all this stuff just roaming through my head? Why am I so angry? Why do I feel like I can't talk to anybody? That split second, he thought about alcohol. But he just said, no, there's got to be a different way. So he just went into the garden and he just sat and he just stared, wondered, loads of stuff. He just really didn't know what to do. He had no idea. He only came in for food. He did apologise to Eleanor, but how do you apologise for something like that? He couldn't bring himself to do it because he didn't understand what had happened. He can remember having the flashback and the dream where he was, and he did try to explain that, but he just couldn't find the words.
After the incident, John wasn't very talkative. Eleanor did her best in every way possible to speak to John and just try and help him in some way, but it just wasn't possible. It was just so far away from her, and it hurt her really deeply. She was really so hurt by it, but she still stood by him. She knew that he were in there, and she knew that one day, just one day, that maybe she'd find him again. Eleanor were at a loss for quite a while, but she decided the only course of action she could take was to call a doctor in the hopes that John would speak to him. So she called up the doctor. He was called Dr. Bell. Brilliant family doctor, amazing. Everybody knew him so well. Back then, doctors were always fabulous, well, mostly. But as soon as Dr. Bell walked through the door, John was sat down in his chair. Dr. Bell sat opposite him, and John just smiled. He knew that the doctor would know exactly what he was feeling. The doctor had seen it many times before. It might sound strange that John knew, but it was just one of those things. He knew the doctor's history, he knew that he'd been to war himself, and there was just that knowing there between them. So eventually, after a while and a couple of cups of tea, John opened up to the doctor, and the doctor was a massive help to him. And that set John off on his journey to becoming himself again. Right, as always, thank you for watching, and to all subscribers, thank you so much for being there. If you got this far, like and subscribe. If you want to comment, leave us a comment, and anything you want to see us do in future, let us know. Bye for now.